Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here. Sorry for the short delay, but we have with us Robbie Martin of MediaRoots.org, and they do a podcast. You can get that there. You can also donate at MediaRoots.org. The podcast right here in the upper corner, it's weekly, and right behind my big fat head is where you can donate. And I would really hope that a lot of you would donate and stand up for free speech, because the mainstream media has completely ignored Robbie's sister's plight to say, hey, I'm not going to pledge my allegiance to Israel. I shouldn't have to pledge my allegiance to any nation state, let alone Israel. You shouldn't have to pledge your allegiance to this one right here. I refuse to pledge allegiance in the name of oppression. And we have to stand up for free speech, and we have to stand up for the right thing. And she's done an amazing film, Gaza Fights for Freedom. And not surprisingly, the ghouls over at IMDb and the attackers have brought it down to 4.8, when it really does an amazing job of exposing just some of the many tragedies that are actually going on in Israel, Robbie.
Yeah, I mean, because I was actually doing a podcast with Abby about this. So we did a whole Media Roots radio episode about her lawsuit, because what people may not understand is this could really be game changing for free speech and the First Amendment in this country moving forward. If it succeeds or if it gets knocked down, either way, it's going to be game changing. And one of the things I realized while even talking to my sister about this for the podcast is we spent about 90% of the time talking about the lawsuit, what BDS laws, what BDS actually means, how you practice it, and what all these state laws are trying to do. But ultimately, Jason, this is about the Israeli government trying to suppress and hide the plight of the Palestinians, plain and simple. They don't want people to openly be boycotting the state of Israel. Why? Why don't they want that? It's because the more people that do that, the more awareness will be brought to the fact that they are running an open-air prison, subjugating millions of people with no real rights. And living in a segregated society, dehumanizing them. This is the real core issue here, and this is why BDS as a form of activism is extremely important. This is how attention was brought to apartheid South Africa. It started with citizen-based activism, doing sanctions. That's how that ramped up. Israel knows how powerful this can be as a form of activism, and that is why they have lobbied not just the federal government, not just gotten their tentacles all the way up inside the Trump White House, all the way up into his ass. They've actually gotten their tentacles into all these state legislatures as well to pass unconstitutional state laws that require you to sign a loyalty pledge to Israel, or you cannot be paid for state contracted work. That's an incredible subversion of the First Amendment and the Constitution. And somehow the Israeli government has gotten away with doing this in dozens of states. I think something like over 25 states right now. And Jason, you would almost expect the Israeli government to want to be doing this in secret, kind of insidiously. But no, they're out there on Twitter. The Israeli prime minister's account, 2 or 3 days after my sister filed this lawsuit, is openly bragging about how much they have spent millions of dollars trying to actually influence state laws in the United States to basically ban practicing BDS, which is so crazy. Like, even just trying to imagine, how would they ban you? Like, how would they define as someone who is violating this loyalty pledge? Like,
let's just talk about that for a second. Because, Pompeo is on the record saying things like, saying being anti-Israel is anti-Semitic, period. And that is unbelievable. So if you're against the policy, again, of a nation state that openly practices a modern form of apartheid outwardly, and I'm so glad that you used that word, because Jimmy Carter, a lot of people forget this, a little over a decade ago, wrote a book and did a tour, and there was a documentary on this called Peace Not Apartheid, because it was so outward. This is a former president of the United States talking about that policy in Israel, basically saying he was duped, as more and more territory was taken by the Palestinians, and that only a true two-state solution would actually work. There is no two-state solution in this current government, or really any Israeli government plans. And when we talk about BDS, we are talking about free speech. But the problem is, Robbie, we have now an administration and a nation that has moved the goalposts so far that we're not talking about that false flag in Syria. We're not talking about Chelsea Manning being wrongly detained after Manning's sentence was commuted. We're not talking about the fact that now on Monday of next week, 1 week from today, an extradition hearing will happen for Julian Assange, where now the Queen has weighed in and said she's not going to step in because it's a political issue. Everybody acts like she has no power. She could stop the extradition right now, and everybody knows it. Two, Boris Johnson refused to actually specifically weigh in when put on the spot by Corbyn. So why not? I mean, when you can get state legislator, like you said, to basically end free speech by saying you can't criticize or boycott another nation state, let alone this one. We don't have to pledge our allegiance to this country. That's one of the great things about America. You don't have to pledge your allegiance to anybody, Robbie.
Well, yeah, that's what's so strange about this, Jason, is that this could be, you could replace this with any foreign government. Even if you had to pledge a loyalty oath to the state of Georgia, that would be unconstitutional. So it's one thing to pledge a loyalty oath to any state, but the fact that this is about Israel really just shows how the real foreign meddlers in our quote-unquote democracy, it's not Russia. One of the primary meddlers is actually Israel. And it's not just, and this is not anti-Semitic or conspiratorial to say, the Israeli PM is now admitting on Twitter how actively they are trying to subvert the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment by influencing states to pass these laws. It's out there in the open. And what's so fascinating to me, Jason, is that people like Ben Shapiro, who's a pretty much out in the open neocon Zionist, he's funded by billionaires like Robert Mercer. He has made it this right-wing issue that free speech is being censored on college campuses because protesters will, try to deplatform these people like him from speaking at college campuses. Well, I can guarantee you, Jason, that Ben Shapiro, Ann Coulter, Milo Yiannopoulos, whatever, pick any of these names, do not have a strong First Amendment case against any state or any college in regard to their free speech being violated. The difference here is that Abby actually has a very clear-cut First Amendment case that's actually very strong.
Let me just stop you there. Not only a clear case, but in any of those other named cases, if that had happened, the media would have been all over it. And there is a veritable blackout in Western media about this lawsuit in general.
Well, that too, yeah. And it's actually interesting that Times of Israel and Associated Press both covered Abby's press conference about the lawsuit, but that really went under the radar. Those stories didn't have legs and move anywhere, but surprisingly got some coverage. Now, it's fascinating to me that people like Ben Shapiro, and let's call it Tucker Carlson. I checked Tucker Carlson's website. The last time he talked about BDS, the only time I found that he talked about BDS and college campuses or state laws, was when a poor college professor, Jason, wrote a pro-Israel, pro-apartheid op-ed in the Federalist and got a bunch of angry letters calling for his resignation. So that's what Tucker deems an important free speech issue, to bring on a Zionist who's getting angry letters written about him at a college. Not people who are actually being banned from working, from getting paid for refusing to sign a loyalty pledge to Israel. I mean, he's brought on something like 40 different people, including people like, I want to say Eric Weinstein is his name, the guy from Evergreen College. I mean, these are not actual First Amendment issues. And it's, like you said, it's mostly the blackout that I'm noticing most is in outlets like the Daily Caller, like any of these right-wing outlets, because what's unfortunate is they won't cover anything that CARE is involved in. Now, CARE, the organization, is working with Abby on this lawsuit. And that alone is going to make most of these right-wing media outlets not want to touch it. And not only that, most of the right-wing media outlets are pro-Israel anyways, and they're the same ones equating criticizing Israel with anti-Semitism.
Well, I mean, let's just stop. I would say all major media outlets at this point. It's, I mean, how can we even call it right wing when CNN, MSNBC, they're going to take the same position? They're not going to report on this either. Your ABCs, your CBS, your NBCs. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Number one, I think these people want to see how far they can take it. If they can, state by state, make it illegal for you to, again, accuse any nation state of doing something wrong or speaking out, and then they can stop you from speaking at a university because you wouldn't sign this pledge to another nation. I mean, forget about it. Everything's off the table, right? I mean, we've always been at war with Eurasia, bro.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this comes down to some really specific legal wording that you forfeit your ability to get paid as a state contractor unless you sign a loyalty pledge to Israel. This is almost totally coincidental that Abby was put into this situation. I mean, the coincidental part is that she is one of the most prominent, BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions advocates out there. She's done some extremely important work on the apartheid state of Israel and promoting Palestinian rights. She just released an incredible documentary film, Gaza Fights for Freedom. And the fact that she was invited to speak about media literacy wasn't even related to Israel. It's actually a really kind of serendipitous thing that she was put in this situation where it's
ironic too, writing. Like you said.
And it's in writing, as clear as day, that they are violating the First Amendment. And when she showed this to lawyers, when it got to that point, they were like, this is one of the strongest cases we've ever seen regarding any of these BDS laws that have been passed so far. Because it's there in writing. It's a contract that you have to sign. It specifically says you will not get paid unless you sign this. I mean, it's all there. So I'm really on board with this lawsuit. And I think that, if you really genuinely care about free speech and that's your main issue, free speech absolutist, whatever you are, right or left, this should be something that you should be paying attention to, even if you have problems with Abby's politics, because this will actually change the First Amendment going forward. I mean, it really could. And if it gets knocked down, Jason, and if they say this law should stand in Georgia, that's a really bad sign moving forward. I mean, that'll embolden the Israeli government from trying to pass more of these laws. And not to mention, also, I forgot to mention that on the executive side of it and the Senate side, they've been trying to pass these kinds of laws for the last 3 or 4 years. So Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer, Marco Rubio. So it's like the Zionist Democrats and the neocons sort of coming together bipartisan fashion to basically pass a federal version of this, where you are violating the law if you practice BDS. I mean, that will be really scary if that goes through. But before that goes through, I think everybody needs to be fighting against these laws because they are blatantly unconstitutional. I mean, even in Texas, during the last flood, state workers, or contractors rather, who needed to get federal state relief funds to help people rebuild their homes from the government, they found out that when they tried to do it, they had to sign an anti-BDS loyalty pledge too. So literally people hiring contractors to get their homes rebuilt from floods, catastrophic flooding, that also involves an anti-BDS.
And let's just, let's put that in perspective. A lot of these people are totally going to be apolitical. Apolitical. Yeah. They couldn't point to Israel on a map if you paid them $1 million on the spot. I'd say that's about 60% of them. But then those that are politically active, they're going to grind down on, and they're going to try to make examples of those people. And that's also very scary. And it goes beyond the political spectrum, because you have both conservatives and liberals, Democrats, whatever you want to say, that are critical of Israel for varying reasons. So, again, why am I signing a political pledge to a nation state that I don't even belong to? I think that's beyond weird. I want to remind everybody, again, the Media Roots podcast with Abby Martin every week is over at MediaRoots.org in the top corner, and you guys can donate right here behind me. I want to shift gears, and by the way, Robbie Martin's channel, a very heavy agenda, lots of Maine politics, and we're going to talk some politics right now. We're going to get big gay ice cream all over you. We're going to talk about that. viral clip of him going up to like in the sky in a 1920s Biden-esque out of touch bullshit Broadway show that couldn't sell you a billionaire if you could. We're going to talk Hillary. Actually, that's something we've been talking about for a while now. I think since really the election, we've talked about a Bloomberg Hillary Clinton ticket as a possibility, and lo and behold, that's making headlines. So Robbie Martin, out of the gates, we know that he's pretty much bought his way into the Nevada debates. Tulsi Gabbard not going to be allowed in the Nevada debates. I just think that it's so outwardly rigged this year, and they don't want another anti-war voice. They've gotten rid of Yang, any kind of voice of reason. They've marginalized Gabbard to the point they're trying to strangle her campaign out there, and they're trying to make it about crazy Bernie. Yet they can't sell you on anybody. Tell us about Mikey B, Michael Bloomberg.
Well, geez, where do I start? I mean, let's start with one of the more obvious low-hanging fruit things about him that people need to know, as he's kind of like Trump in a way that he's not really a Democrat. Sort of the inverse of Trump, how Trump's not really a Republican, how Trump was basically a Democrat only like 5 years before he started running for president. This is a similar thing with Mike Bloomberg, as he was an out and open, hardcore neoconservative Republican during the Bush era. And this is all on record. He actually spoke at the GOP 2004 convention, Jason, and said that he approved and wanted to continue Bush's war on terror and the war in Iraq, fully supportive of it. That alone should make Democrats not want to vote for him. But the problem is I'm seeing a lot of Democrats starting to fall for the paradigm that, oh, well, he's a billionaire. Maybe he can beat Trump. Maybe this is the only guy who can beat Trump. So now it's just vote blue no matter who, right? Well, I can tell you that Bloomberg is probably worse than Trump. I mean, we're talking about 3 billionaires now currently being in the 2020 race, unless Tom Steyer already dropped out and I didn't know.
No, he's still in it.
Okay.
They're going to let Steyer in at the Nevada fucking... Yeah. Again, listen, Tom Steyer at least is somewhat respectable up there and isn't a total and complete blowhard aside from the Russiagate bullshit. He says some intelligent things, but like you said, you got 3 billionaires and a fucking intelligent assets wet dream up there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So think about this. Michael Bloomberg is worth $60 billion. I mean, that's insane. We don't even know if Trump is actually worth $1 billion. Maybe he is, maybe he's not quite worth $1 billion. $60 billion. I mean, that can buy you the election. Like nobody's
trying.
Run.
Listen, let's put it this way, Robbie. I just saw Where's My Roy Cohn? Finally watched it. Tell me that motherfucker doesn't remind you of a Roy Cohn type times $1 billion, times 60 billion. Don't get me wrong. Roy Cohn was flamboyant and out there, and he's kind of the inverse in that in public. But let's look at the similarities. Smaller guys, Jewish by descent, kind of self-loathing, closeted homosexuals. They crave power. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, and there's no way you get to $60 billion unless you are a cutthroat, deceptive motherfucker. I don't care what you say. And then you end up being the mayor of New York City. Well, come on, man. I mean, you put all that together. I mean, he's a eugenicist. He's part of the club. He goes to those goddamn meetings with, he went, I played, because Dawkins was in the news for his eugenics comments the other day. I played the clip where it was Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, Michael Bloomberg, Oprah Winfrey, all sitting down and talking about David Rockefeller when he was alive, how great eugenics is. And we got to talk about population control. And I mean, you got Dawkins saying, well, it would work. It works with chickens.
Yeah. I mean, well, let's talk a little bit about his tenure as mayor. So, Kevin Ryan in his book, Another 19, identified as one of his potential 9/11 alternate 19 suspects, Rudy Giuliani, as being instrumental in the 9/11 cover-up, not just in general, while being mayor, but in terms of like the forensic evidence of 9/11. Now, people may not realize this, but Bloomberg actually stepped in January of 2002. So only about 4 months or so after 9/11. So following Rudy's footsteps, he continued the active cover-up of the 9/11 crime scene. Even though all the steel rubble was already destroyed at that point, Michael Bloomberg was instrumental in helping keep up a PR front information war to help sell Bush's war on terror from New York City. I don't know if you're aware of this, Burmis, but he actually is credited for stopping what could have been, I guess, the most spectacular terrorist attack since 9/11, the Times Square bomber
that.
of 2010. Yeah. So I think somebody out there, if they're interested in this line of inquiry, should seriously look into all the terrorism cases that had to do with the NYPD enforcing them, because I would be willing to bet that there's a whole lot of entrapment going on there in terms of the Muslim communities in New York City. That's not, I mean, I think we could be pretty sure that that's the case.
We saw it in Newburgh, 100%. We saw just that case in Newburgh, which is in the Hudson Valley, which is about 45 miles outside of the city. And that was a big case that they tried to flaunt with pizzerias and spectacular things. And it turned out these guys didn't want to commit anything. They wanted to roll the FBI informant and steal from him because he was flaunting all this money. They weren't devout Muslims. Like,
thing?
What's that?
Was this when their pressure cookers were like found on the streets?
No, I don't even think.
Okay.
I don't even think they found that. I don't even think that. I think this was a bust beforehand. Let's go to the Newburgh.
Fried chicken place.
There's a documentary film. HBO did one about it. There's actually a Hollywood film where they talk about this recently, but it was a UK director and writer. Newburgh terrorists. Oh, see, there's the documentary. So the Newburgh Sting. You can look into it, but it was the 2009 Bronx terrorism, all fabricated. Johnny nonsense, keep you in fear. Ooh, bad Muslims. Ooh, scary.
Well, just so people don't think I'm totally talking out of my ass about Michael Bloomberg being instrumental in covering up 9/11, how many people, Jason, do you remember on record trying to dissuade people or investigators into looking at the 9/11 crime scene and the forensic evidence? I mean, it's not very common, actually, when you'll hear an official saying something like that, because for people like you and me who have looked into 9/11 truth, that's like a dead giveaway that something's really suspicious about that person. So let me read you a quote from China.org, a news story that came out in 2002, I believe, about 6 months into him being mayor. It says, New York authorities' decision to ship the Twin Tower scrap to recyclers has raised the anger of victims' families and some engineers who believe the massive girders should be further examined to help determine how the towers collapsed. But New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg insisted that there are better ways to study the tragedy of September 11th. If you want to take a look at the construction methods and design, he says, that in this day and age is what computers do. And it goes on to say Bloomberg is a former engineering major. And he says just looking at a piece of metal generally doesn't tell you anything. It's very interesting that Michael Bloomberg, only 6 months into his position as being mayor, knows exactly what to do, Jason, to keep up the 9/11 myth. He is actively trying to tell people not to look at the forensic evidence. How interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me. I remember, there's that one clip from Loose Change Final Cut where, you had the guy who was parading the NIST report out there, and he gets confronted on the NASA thermal imagery and the length of time you had these hot spots that were beyond the point that they could say, well, this was caused by such and such a fire. But beyond the melting point of steel, really. But you had 2,000 plus degree temperatures that didn't seem normal. And then you had FEMA reports from Ken Holden in Building 6 where it looked like a foundry and there was metal dripping there. You have all this eyewitness testimony, but let's not investigate the steel. And even to this day, I fully believe, especially, we were talking about this in your live chat, that they have this evidence and that it's under seal. And, lo and behold, I don't want to say the institution because God forbid, something happened to my buddy, but, a high-level institution, we'll say, wants to destroy their material from 9/11, and they want to bring a hazmat team in there. And,
wow.
and again, remember the forensics that they did get done with those hard drives? What did it do? It pointed to insider knowledge and insider trading from within the building. That's insanity.
God, yeah, that's such a big rabbit hole in and of itself.
It really is. But it's
We could have to
fact.
do a whole documentary about just that subject.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
let me mention something else that's interesting about him, Jason. And most people, I don't think, have connected all these things together, even though it's really obvious in retrospect. But Michael Bloomberg was instrumental in what became basically a war on terror, lockdown police state, quasi martial law situation in New York City and downtown Manhattan. I mean, I visited Manhattan in 2003, and this went on for many years, and you could attest to this. There
yep.
were army fatigue soldiers in the subway with machine guns.
There
There
still
were
are now
tanks
today.
on Wall Street. There were SWAT team, militarized police walking around Times Square, like patrolling it. I mean, this was the norm. This was the new normal that Michael Bloomberg helped create. And stop and frisk had to do with the war on terror also. It wasn't just a racial or gun grabbing policy. It was also about patrolling Muslim communities and stopping terror before it started. It was the whole pre-crime concept.
Yeah, a dirty bomb could go off in the city, Robbie. Hey, one of these guys could have a dirty bomb or a chemical agent, and you know better than anybody, the anthrax scare and that propaganda also lasted for years. And still the public really isn't familiar that wasn't no Muslims, folks. That wasn't no Muslims.
And also, what are the chances of someone being wrapped up in two of these really fear-mongery bioweapon terror, scares? Michael Bloomberg's office got sent on two separate occasions about 10 years apart, an anthrax letter about, I think it was like around 2004. And then later, he personally got sent to his office a ricin letter a day or two after those Boston bombings, Jason, which I don't know if you remember how weird it was that a ricin letter had gone out to like Obama and Bloomberg around that time period.
And it was so weird because, again, you had the reports of drills that morning, right? You had, I don't even want to go into I haven't gone, I should really go back into Boston. But talk about a frame up. Those kids, I remember I tweeted it out. I wonder if that video is even still available. I'd have to go through and look. But I tweeted out those kids, both of those, Tamerlan and his, Tamerlan who didn't survive, and the other one, Zarnoff, going, chill out. We didn't do it. And they're just shooting at him. Pop, 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 pop. They're begging for their lives. They're not shooting back. And this is on video, and it was never, ever talked about. And for me, there's still a lot of questions about that just surrounding who was that naked man that you didn't get a clear look at his face that looked a shit ton like Tamerlan, and then Tamerlan was dead afterwards, You had the drill, and no one wants to talk about that. Like, that's uncomfortable. But then you had the same playbook. Muslim terrorists. You had these guys were what? They were on, I forget how they said it, but, they were basically jihadists. They were trying to portray them as jihadists.
Jihadists and truthers.
Yeah, and truthers on top of it. Yeah, it was the craziest spin, dude. And like you said, all of a sudden you have this bio-warfare thing on the heels of it. And a lot of people forget that part of 9/11, especially those that didn't live through it, that we were on edge for months and months, before even they had the color-coded system of terror, because, they were checking water supplies, they were checking mail. The airports were shut down. It wasn't like everybody was able to text each other. There was no texting, guys. Texting didn't really exist. It wasn't a thing. You had to talk on the phone or get on a message board or an IM. Times were different, Robbie, but the way we've scaled into 2020 and like looking at your sister, looking at our candidates, looking at how far the goalpost has been moved and how they've removed any voice of reason fairly well. Tulsi Gabbard, man, think about how much press she's gotten since she tried to sue Hillary. That was the end. That was it. That was the end of any kind of positive mainstream press on every fucking network, and any push that she would be included in any of these things and any coverage after the fact. It's been gone since then. And remember, Hillary Clinton's not going to get served by that thing. Her Secret Service, it will pip smack anybody rolling up to Hillary Clinton to serve her ass. They're going to have to be cunning. They're going to have to get front row fucking seats at the View and run up during filming and serve her before she gets tackled.
Tulsi will have to do a stunt where she films herself serving Hillary. That'll be the way to get more media attention. So Tulsi, if you're listening,
If they could set that up,
Hillary on camera.
wouldn't that be
Hire a
perfect? Why would
Yeah,
that would be
exactly.
the perfect media stunt for someone to betray them? Like
you're dressed in that red outfit, like that Tulsi always wears. It'd be fucking awesome.
So someone goes rogue and has Tulsi just come out of the back with it herself and serves Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
You're served, bitch. That's the only way she can win the election, because that's the WWE style we live in. Stephen Chase says, great info from the Ultimate Info Warrior. Much love, brother. Much love to you. You've been on for a half an hour. We should wrap it up. I've got Andrew from Action for Assange coming up later this evening. I'm actually going to D.C. Next week, Robbie. I really want people to understand this is a huge story. Again, even if you don't agree with Abby's politics or her viewpoints, you don't have to. You should be believing in free speech and that we shouldn't have to pledge our allegiance to any nation over anything, period. That's what this country is based on.
Yeah, isn't this what Jordan Peterson thing was kind of like sort of dovetailing off of, that he wouldn't agree to like use all those weird trans pronouns?
Yeah.
And that was what his whole movement spurred from. So it's like, dude, think about how much bigger of a deal this is. This is literally trying to pledge your allegiance to a foreign country. Mm-hmm. It's finable. If you violate the oath, you can get fined.
Well, in that country, in that country, you go to jail now. That's the other thing. Forget about finable. I think they're equally big issues, but the other thing is this. What
are the BDS laws in Canada, though? That would be something to explore.
I would say this,
probably some by now.
Have you heard what happened to Peterson?
Yeah, dude, it's pretty sad. Yeah,
that is sad. 1 minute you're this professor, the next minute you're kind of this internet superstar, the next minute you're speaking at the Trilateral Commission, and then you're in a medically induced coma in Russia. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, whoa. I don't wish that upon anybody. Whether I agree or disagree with his politics. You can find Robbie Martin right here at a very heavy agenda. You like MAME? You like politics? You like Samurai Showdown? I know I do. I'm a big fan myself. Rob, you got anything else to say before we go?
I guess I just like people to really look into Bloomberg and his role in carrying out all this war on terror, fear-mongering, and propaganda. I think that it's a surprisingly unexplored subject because, when he was doing a lot of this stuff, it was largely normalized. He was only mayor until 2013. So I feel like a lot of people, were just mostly accepting and acquiescent to all these horrific acts of like terror suspect roundups or all these frame ups and just all these draconian laws. I mean, it says in this book about Bloomberg, I just wanted to read this really quickly, that he nabbed Raymond Kelly to be his police chief because he had experience in Washington and at a pay cut. And so Raymond Kelly actually hired a CIA spook to run and manage a lot of the policy at the NYPD named David Cohen. And one of his orders after he was hired in 2002 was to form the New York City's own version of the CIA and FBI as a counterterrorism task force. So that's what kind of crazy shit was going on in New York City during Bloomberg.
It never stopped, though. That's the other thing. Like, you go down to New York City.
Yeah. Bill de Blasio carried the torch, or whoever was, I don't know if he was mayor right after Bloomberg.
No, there was somebody in between. But actually, no, I think you are right. I think it has been de Blasio.
Speaking of de Blasio, really quickly, I wanted to just say he also tried to pass laws banning BDS that didn't succeed. And 9/11 ballot initiatives, were mostly trying to be passed under Bloomberg's administration, which he, of course, tried to knock down. He also tried to force first responders and their families to settle, basically threatening a protracted, endless, legal dispute.
Very against the Zadroga Act. Very against the Zadroga Act.
Yeah. So there's so many bad things about Bloomberg and 9/11 and the war on terror just alone that I think that should really creep out anybody. And to actually say honestly that he is possibly quite worse than Trump. So, I mean,
there's no possibly about it. Let me explain this again. I'm gonna break it down for fucking people. People were running with the meme and the joke, Robbie, that, what does this guy want to get suicided? He's gonna have Hillary as his running mate. Hashtag Clinton body count. I got news for you, motherfuckers. He is a motherfucking billionaire. We're talking, like you just said, 60 billion in assets and money we know. Can you imagine how much money he's laundered, how many properties and sub companies he has that you have no fucking idea about, how many foundations and tax-free havens he's manipulated over the years, how many real bodies are in the fucking ground on the mayor of New York City, who again is, I mean, most people again don't know he's a closeted homosexual. I'll say it. He is a closeted homosexual.
I have never heard anything about that, but I'll look into that.
Oh, come on.
He does have, maybe that explains why he has 40 sexual harassment lawsuits against him from women. Maybe he's overcompensating. I mean, I don't know. That's quite a lot of, I don't even think Trump has nearly that many.
Listen, man, I've seen all those creep things. Just because you like women doesn't mean you don't like men. I mean, I think that's proven time and time again. You know, that's a subject.
Michael Bloomberg is heteroflexible.
I don't even know if he's that, man. I think he's a dark dude. I think he's you got to see Where's My Roy Cohn. I'll tell you what, my imagination soared.
Yeah, I need to see that.
You know, there was a point in the movie. You know, Roger Stone's interviewed, all like some insiders, family members are interviewed about him. And I mean, this guy's always got crimes going on that he was never caught for, like running banks that didn't really exist, you know, auditing money that's not there. You fucking name it. This guy was doing it. And apparently his dream was to be the governor of New York, like, because like he just wanted to manipulate people that much. Well, this guy, again, like you said, was the mayor of New York City, really worth $60 billion. And he plays hardball with the best of them, man. Just because he looks reserved, just because he's a little man, you know, we get fooled. Our minds get fooled by somebody's appearance. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, again, you look at Roy Cohn, little dude, vicious motherfucker. Lie right to your face. I mean, in these interviews, he's lying like you wouldn't, like, he's lying way above. You want to know where Trump got it? There's a good section towards the tail end of the picture. You want to know where this guy got where he could look you dead in the fucking eye, make you feel like you were the most special person in the room, and basically lie his fucking ass off to you? Roy fucking Cohn. I'm sorry I went on a cursing nightmare in the last 5 minutes of the broadcast, folks, but I really couldn't help myself. Robbie Martin, always a pleasure. Got to have you on soon, brother. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me again, Jason.
It's always the best. I always like having Robbie, man. Guys, if you want to support me, I got this thing. It's called a Rockfin. Rockfin.com/Jason Burmis. You get all sorts of exclusives you won't get anywhere else. You get throwbacks. You get videos. It costs you nothing to sign up and follow me. If you do follow me, you get premium content like this throwback or this premium video not available on YouTube. This video that I just made available to everybody that was premium that you can't do on YouTube or they censor your channel. So we're doing things here that we can't do there. And $9.99 a month gets you everybody's content. It's like a Netflix for creators. It promotes free speech. I'm really into it. It's a lot different than a lot of the other platforms out there. Action for Assange. At the top of the next hour, not 9 p.m., but 10 p.m. Eastern, I will be having Andrew from Action for Assange on. We're going to be talking about all the different actions that are going to take place next week. I'm going to D.C. I'm going to take part in some of those actions. I'm definitely going to be streaming from there and letting people know how ridiculous this case is and how we need to speak out and say there's no reason that this person should be extradited to this country. Thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share. Let's grow the Burmis Brigade. Let's have a better second half of February than we did the first half of February and pretty much all of January where we basically lost subscribers. Let's get to 40K. Love to get to 40K. I know we can with your help. Staying positive. All my documentary films are free right here. Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and Shade the Motion Picture. Go to the documentaries playlist section. And $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. It's how we're keeping this running. It's how I'm going to D.C. next week. And we'll see how long I can stay there. It's probably based on how well the GoFundMe does this week. I'm going to book a car and a room, and we'll see. I'm probably going to head out Sunday night, start broadcasting on Monday. Thank you guys so much. I love you, and I'll see you on the flip side.